Carl Jung's warning about empaths. It's darker than you think. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. At Spiritual Wisdom, we believe that awakening begins with awareness. And for empaths, that awareness often feels like both a gift and a burden. In this video, we'll explore Carl Jung's deeper and more unsettling warning about the empathic path truths that are rarely spoken but urgently needed. These insights aren't just theory. They're a mirror to help you navigate your emotions, protect your energy, and grow into your highest self. As you watch, ask yourself, how has your empathy shaped your relationships and your identity? Share your reflections in the comments, and let's awaken together. 1. Empathy is an archetypal, not just emotional, gift. True empaths are not just emotionally sensitive individuals. They are psychic conduits through which unseen forces pass. While modern culture paints empathy as a gentle gift, Carl Jung's deeper insight reveals something far more complex. The empath does not simply feel with others. Instead, they absorb emotional energy like a sponge, often unknowingly channeling the unresolved pain of others, the tension of the collective, and even the echoes of ancestral trauma. This isn't sentimentality. This is soul work. Empathy, in its truest form, is archetypal. It belongs not to the ego, but to the realm of the unconscious. Jung understood that empaths are intimately connected to powerful, universal patterns that stretch far beyond personal experience. They are tapped into the undercurrent of humanity's unspoken sorrow. And this is why their burden is so heavy. They may feel grief without cause, carry anxiety that doesn't originate from their own life, or wake with dread that belongs to the emotional atmosphere of society itself. This capacity to feel deeply and widely isn't always a blessing. Empaths often suffer because they don't know where their emotions end and another's begin. They walk through the world absorbing the invisible, a fight between light and shadow that most people don't even realize is happening. This is not a gift for the faint of heart, and it is rarely acknowledged for the spiritual weight it carries. Without awareness, the empath may drown in what they carry. But with spiritual wisdom, they learn to navigate the tides. What's most dangerous is that the world doesn't often recognize the true empath. Instead of seeing a sacred mirror, society labels them as too emotional, too sensitive, or too dramatic. In truth, the empath is reflecting what others can't bear to see in themselves. Their energy exposes repression. Their presence stirs buried pain. And that's why many people unconsciously reject them, not because of who they are, but because of what they awaken. Spiritual wisdom teaches that energy must be discerned, not just felt. And this is the empath's task, to learn what is theirs to carry and what is not. This requires deep boundaries, not walls, but intelligent filters that allow clarity to pass and distortion to be blocked. Without this skill, the empath becomes a dumping ground for the collective shadow. But when mastered, their sensitivity becomes a superpower, not for attention, not for approval, but for alchemy. The empath is not here to be comfortable. They are here to transform pain into presence, emotion into awareness, darkness into light. That's the deeper role Jung pointed to. Not the romanticized empath, but the archetypal vessel. And if one does not understand this role, they risk being consumed by it. But when understood through the lens of spiritual wisdom, empathy becomes something else entirely. Not a burden, but a sacred path. Have you ever felt emotions that didn't seem to belong to you, like you were carrying the weight of something ancient or collective? If so, share your experience in the comments below so others can feel seen too. And if you're just starting to explore your empathic gift, type, "I'm open to understanding," so we can walk this path of spiritual discovery together. 2. Unconscious empathy leads to possession and self-loss. When empaths operate unconsciously, they don't just feel others' emotions, they become entangled in them. Without clear boundaries, they absorb emotional pain like a sponge, often mistaking it for their own. They carry the weight of unresolved trauma, shadows, and psychic debris that do not belong to them. This isn't simply compassion, it's energetic possession. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the unaware empath, this fate takes the form of emotional confusion, chronic fatigue, and the gradual erasure of self. Their identity begins to blur. Their center becomes unstable, and they live in a state of constant emotional flooding, like a mirror that reflects every wound but forgets its own face. This merging of energies is dangerous because it pulls the empath into other people's inner chaos, leaving them haunted by emotions that aren't theirs. These inner disturbances often surface in dreams, mirrors that twist their reflection, caves that trap them in darkness, and ghost-like figures symbolizing energies that need release. These are not just poetic images. They are the language of the unconscious trying to speak. They reveal a life lived for others, a self that has been eclipsed. The empath becomes a silent witness to pain, yet internally cries out for boundaries that were never taught. And so the spiritual burden deepens. True spiritual awakening begins not with more feeling, but with more awareness. It is not about absorbing more, but about learning what to let go. The empath must awaken to the fact that their ability to feel is not a curse, but neither is it a blank check to carry everyone's suffering. They must stop confusing love with self-sacrifice and instead embody discernment, the wisdom to know what is theirs to hold and what is theirs to release. This awakening demands inner work, grounding, energetic boundaries, and the courage to confront patterns of over-responsibility. It is only when the empath reclaims their energy that healing begins. Spiritual awakening is the process of returning to the self, not the role, not the mask, not the emotional caretaker, but the soul behind it all. The empath must learn to stand still in their own truth, without flinching, without shrinking, without merging. As Rumi said, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." For the awakened empath, that cure comes when they finally stop rescuing others at the cost of abandoning themselves. They don't stop loving, but they stop leaking. They don't stop caring, but they stop collapsing. They become clear vessels of light rather than foggy mirrors of everyone else's sorrow. And in that clarity, they don't just survive, they rise. If this message resonated with you, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. 3. Childhood trauma and ancestral pain shape the empath's identity. Many empaths don't become sensitive because they were born that way. They become empaths because they had to. In chaotic or emotionally unstable homes, they learned early on that tuning into others was a matter of safety, not choice. This wasn't a gift at first, it was survival. A child who has to monitor their parents' every mood to avoid punishment or rejection will grow up to become an adult who scans every room for danger, even if it's emotional. What looks like intuition is often the refined skill of reading people developed under pressure, under fear, under silence. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For empaths, this couldn't be more true. Many are driven by unconscious wounds from the past, shaped by experiences they couldn't control. Worse still, it's not just personal trauma they carry, it's ancestral. The grief and unresolved pain of previous generations get passed down quietly through behaviors, emotional suppression, and spiritual disconnection. Empaths are often the ones in the family system who feel it all, who absorb what others deny. But without healing, that gift becomes a weight. They feel everything, but understand very little of where it comes from. And the result is exhaustion, confusion, and self-neglect. Take the example of a woman named Sarah. As a child, she lived in a home where her father was kind one moment and emotionally cold the next. To survive, she learned to become hyper-aware. She could sense when to speak, when to disappear, and when to comfort others at the expense of herself. That gift earned her praise later in life. People loved her empathy, her warmth, her ability to get them. But what they didn't see was the cost. Behind that emotional radar was a little girl who had never learned how to turn it off. Like many empaths, Sarah was living in reaction to her past, not in connection with her present. Carl Jung called this pattern the archetype of the wounded healer, those who seek to mend others while avoiding their own pain. Many empaths unconsciously fall into this pattern. They don't just help others out of compassion, they do it out of compulsion, believing that by fixing the outside world, they'll feel better inside. But this is a trap, because empathy without boundaries is not love, it's self-abandonment. And when empathy becomes a reflex, not a choice, it drains you. You give and give until there's nothing left, and then you wonder why you feel invisible. The truth is, healing begins when you stop making your empathy a job and start making it a choice. You don't owe the world your exhaustion. You owe yourself restoration. You don't need to carry the pain of every person you meet to prove your worth. Your sensitivity is sacred, but it was never meant to be used as a shield or a burden. It was meant to guide you, not enslave you. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom teaches us that the shadow we don't face becomes the life we unconsciously live. If your empathy was shaped in trauma, then reclaim it through awareness. Turn it from a reaction into a sacred practice. Learn to feel without losing yourself. This isn't about feeling less. It's about feeling wisely. Do you feel this truth in your bones? If you do, declare it boldly in the comments. I am healing generations through my empathy. 4. The shadow side of empathy must be confronted. Empathy can be a quiet disguise for the ego. Beneath the surface of care, there often lies a deep, unspoken need to be seen as important, to be irreplaceable, to be the one others cannot do without. This craving to help can become less about love and more about control. And what appears as compassion can be a silent strategy to escape our own wounds. Carl Jung understood this paradox deeply, that even our most admired traits have a shadow side. When we give endlessly, we may tell ourselves it's because we care, but sometimes we give because we're afraid to look within. Overhelping becomes a pattern. It looks like love, but it's laced with fear. It's the fear of not mattering unless we're needed. It's the avoidance of our own inner pain by fixing everyone else's. And when this happens, empathy no longer serves healing. It serves ego survival. We become emotionally entangled, mistaking sacrifice for virtue and self-erasure for devotion. In truth, we are often trying to soothe ourselves by saving someone else. This kind of empathy is exhausting. It drains the soul because it's not rooted in wholeness, but in fragmentation. We overextend. We absorb pain that's not ours to carry. We merge so deeply with others' suffering that we forget who we are. And the deeper tragedy is that in trying to be everything for everyone, we slowly disappear. What we call compassion becomes a mask we wear to avoid facing our own unmet needs. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom urges us to step back, not to stop caring, but to care consciously. The true empath does not rescue to avoid loneliness. They do not absorb to feel worthy. They do not give endlessly just to be loved. Instead, they learn to hold space without losing themselves. They recognize when their helping is actually hiding. They set energetic boundaries not out of coldness, but out of clarity. Empathy without boundaries becomes codependency. Compassion without awareness becomes emotional manipulation. This is the dark side that must be acknowledged. It is only when we confront these truths that our empathy transforms into power, not the power to fix others, but the power to remain rooted in our own center while still offering love. Jung teaches that everything we do, even the good, must be examined through the lens of self-awareness. Because healing isn't about giving all of ourselves away, it's about becoming whole within, so that what we offer is clean, free, and conscious. The real spiritual wisdom is this: empathy is not just about feeling what others feel. It's about knowing when the feeling isn't yours to hold. If you're ready to confront the shadow side of your empathy and reclaim your true self, comment below. I choose truth over illusion. Let's walk this path of self-awareness together. 5. The true empathy requires boundaries and inner strength. True empathy is not about becoming a sponge for other people's emotions. It's not about soaking in pain until you can't tell where their suffering ends and yours begins. That is emotional fusion, not compassion. Real empathy is witnessing without merging. It's the art of holding space for another soul while remaining anchored in your own. It's saying, I feel you, but I am not you. And that one sentence marks the beginning of a spiritual awakening. Because to awaken is not simply to feel more, it is to see more clearly, to recognize where your energy ends and someone else's begins. Without that clarity, empaths are not gifted. They are exhausted, drained, dissolved into the chaos of the world around them. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That includes the part of you that wants to help, heal, and hold everyone, but also the part that must say no. Boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They are spiritual muscles, forged through discernment and self-trust. A sponge absorbs everything indiscriminately, but a sovereign vessel chooses what it allows in. An empath who is awakened is no longer a victim of energy. They are a guardian of it. Sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a raw perception. But when untrained, it becomes suffering. You can't save others by losing yourself. Empathy, without grounding, becomes self-erasure. But empathy with inner strength becomes a force of healing. You don't need to become harder. You need to become clearer. Clear about your limits. Clear about your role. Clear that your purpose is not to carry everyone, but to hold truth when others have forgotten it. This is the path from sponge to sovereign. The journey from drowning in emotion to becoming a vessel of divine clarity. It is spiritual wisdom in action, the awakening of selfhood, not the denial of it. The more you know yourself, the less likely you are to confuse someone else's chaos for your responsibility. The world doesn't need more people who feel everything. It needs more people who feel deeply and still remain rooted. That is true empathy. That is spiritual awakening. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on transforming empathy from emotional overload into grounded strength and sacred boundaries. 6. Conscious empathy is alchemical and transformative. When an empath awakens, something profound happens. They stop being overwhelmed by the emotions of others and begin transmuting that pain into wisdom. No longer a passive vessel for suffering, the conscious empath becomes a living mirror, not of wounds, but of possibility. They begin to reflect strength, insight, and clarity instead of absorbing confusion and emotional weight. This is the alchemical power of conscious empathy, the kind Carl Jung hinted at when he said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." Instead of rescuing others and losing themselves in the process, awakened empaths learn to hold space. They guide through presence, not control. They love without attachment, without draining their spirit. Their empathy no longer burns them out. It lights the way for others. Jung understood that the unconscious drives most human behavior. And so, when a conscious empath reflects someone's truth back to them, they disrupt the patterns that keep that person asleep. Their presence alone can awaken hidden potential because they've done the work to awaken their own. This kind of empathy requires deep inner strength. It is not soft and fragile. It is sharp, clear, and rooted. It's the kind of empathy that sees through projection, through manipulation, through performance. A conscious empath can feel everything and still remain centered. They've learned that not every emotion they sense belongs to them, and not every soul in pain is theirs to heal. Take Jenna, for example. A nurse and a natural empath, she spent years absorbing the pain of her patients. Every night she came home drained, thinking that this exhaustion was simply part of being a good person. But after stumbling upon Carl Jung's writings and beginning to explore the unconscious roots of her behavior, she realized that her empathy had become martyrdom. She began to build boundaries not as walls to shut others out, but as sacred containers to preserve her energy. She stopped identifying with pain and started channeling it into presence. Today, she still feels deeply, but she no longer drowns. She reflects strength because she has claimed her own. Empathy without consciousness is chaos. But empathy fused with self-awareness becomes spiritual clarity. It transforms reactive emotion into intentional connection. It stops being about taking on the burdens of others and starts being about illuminating the truth within them. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." True empathy is not sacrifice, it's transmutation. And when you learn to feel everything without losing yourself, when you choose presence over performance, you don't just heal, you become the healer. You don't carry the weight of the world, you carry the light that helps others see their own. If this message resonated with your soul, leave a comment of intention. I choose conscious empathy. I transmute pain into light. And don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on walking the path with clarity, strength, and love. 7. The journey requires individuation and daily self-awareness. The empath's path is not merely about feeling deeply. It's about becoming radically self-aware. Carl Jung didn't romanticize empathy. He saw it as a profound psychic function that, if left unchecked, could lead to distortion, projection, and exhaustion. The true journey of the empath is individuation, the lifelong work of becoming whole through conscious self-reflection, shadow integration, and inner alignment. To walk this path is to commit to a daily discipline of asking, "Is this mine?" A question that seems simple, but holds immense spiritual weight. Because without asking it, the empath risks carrying burdens that never belonged to them in the first place. This question creates a pause, a sacred moment where the empath chooses sovereignty over absorption. In that moment, spiritual wisdom begins to take root. Empathy becomes conscious rather than compulsive. You no longer feel everything as yours, but rather you learn to feel with clarity and boundaries. And that is not coldness. That is a sacred responsibility. Jung warned that when we avoid the work of individuation, we inevitably project our unhealed parts onto others. Empaths, by their very nature, become mirrors for that projection, absorbing unresolved pain, guilt, or shame that others unconsciously disown. The result? Emotional overload, spiritual fatigue, and a slow erosion of the self. That's why individuation is not optional. It is essential. It's not about detaching from the world, but about anchoring more deeply into your truth. Emotional honesty becomes your compass, not just in relationships, but within your own inner world. You stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. You stop mistaking spiritual martyrdom for compassion. You begin to see that being an empath is not about being everything for everyone. It's about becoming whole for yourself. And the more whole you become, the more grounded your empathy becomes. It transforms from reaction to presence, from chaos to clarity. Your intuition sharpens. Your energy stabilizes. You become a calm center in a world full of noise. That's the gift of spiritual wisdom. It doesn't numb your sensitivity. It hones it. It teaches you that your light isn't meant to be a lifeline for everyone drowning. It's meant to be a beacon, showing others what self-possession and integrity look like. The empath who walks the path of individuation no longer asks, "How do I help everyone?" but rather, "How do I stay true to myself in every interaction?" That shift changes everything. It is not selfishness. It is sacred alignment. Because when you honor your own energy, you stop leaking it into people, places, and problems that are not yours to heal. You begin to trust that your presence, your truth, your clarity, without overextension, is enough. And that is when you move from surviving empathy to embodying it with grace, power, and peace. If this message resonates with your soul, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Comment below. I commit to my daily journey of self-awareness and soul alignment. And so, remember, being an empath is not just about feeling deeply. It's about carrying unseen burdens, navigating invisible forces, and walking a path that few understand. Carl Jung's warning reminds us that the gift of sensitivity is also a responsibility, a spiritual calling to face what others deny. If this message spoke to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Turn on notifications so you never miss another insight that could transform your inner world. Your journey is sacred. Let's walk it together. Why people suddenly start hating you. The silent war you never see coming. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Sometimes, the hatred you receive has nothing to do with who you are, but everything to do with what you awaken in others. In this video, from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore why people suddenly turn against you, the hidden insecurities it exposes, and the silent spiritual battles most never see. These insights are not just knowledge, they're tools for growth, resilience, and clarity. Have you ever felt attacked for simply being yourself? Share your story in the comments below. We're here to grow through this together. 1. Your growth. Triggers, others' shadows. Your growth doesn't just change your life, it changes how others see themselves. As you begin to heal and rise, you become a mirror. Not one that flatters, but one that reveals. Without trying, you reflect back to others what they've hidden, denied, or avoided within themselves. And that reflection? It's often too raw, too painful, too threatening. So instead of facing their shadows, they project their discomfort onto you. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is the unconscious part of the psyche we try to suppress the fears, wounds, and insecurities we pretend aren't there. When someone hasn't done their inner work, seeing someone else evolve becomes unbearable. Your confidence reminds them of their self-doubt. Your peace stirs their unresolved chaos. Your authenticity disrupts their carefully curated mask. They begin to see you not as you are, but as the embodiment of everything they buried. That's when the silent war begins. No direct conflict, no clear betrayal. Just a shift, a cold shoulder, a sharp tone, a sudden distance. You'll feel it before you understand it. Friends become distant. Co-workers seem colder. Loved ones act offended by your joy. It makes no sense on the surface, but beneath it all, your growth is triggering emotional landmines in others that they have no idea how to diffuse. This reaction is not about you. It's about what you represent. You symbolize what they haven't yet allowed themselves to become. And rather than rise with you, many would rather reject you. Because in their eyes, your light exposes their darkness. And when people don't want to deal with their darkness, they'll resent anyone who shines. Spiritual wisdom reminds us that people rarely hate what they truly understand. They hate what confuses them, threatens them, or forces them to confront their own truth. So when someone suddenly dislikes you for no reason, there is a reason, but it's buried in their own internal landscape. You just happen to be the trigger. Their criticism may be loud, but their pain is louder. They may mock your boundaries, but secretly wish they had the courage to set their own. They may gossip about your success, but deep down, they're mourning the version of themselves they abandoned. The discomfort you cause is often a call their soul hasn't yet answered. So don't shrink to make others comfortable. Don't water yourself down for the sake of fitting in. You are not here to stay small, so others can avoid their own growth. The truth is, you may lose people along the way. But the ones who stay, those who celebrate your evolution, are the ones walking their own path of awakening. The rest? They were never aligned with your future in the first place. You're not being punished for growing. You're being shown who's willing to grow with you. And that is spiritual wisdom worth remembering. Have you ever noticed someone reacting strangely to your growth? If so, share your story in the comments. it might help someone else feel less alone. If you've experienced this but don't know what to say, just comment, "I'm growing anyway," to affirm your journey. 2. Projection is why they turn against you. When you begin your spiritual awakening, something subtle but profound happens. You stop playing the roles that once made others feel comfortable. You no longer shrink yourself to fit their expectations. You stop saying yes when your soul means no. You begin to walk in truth, to protect your peace, and to honor the person you're becoming. And the moment you do that, a quiet resistance often begins to form around you. People you once called friends may grow distant. Family may start to criticize. And without warning, you may become the target of unexpected resentment. It's not that you've done something wrong. It's that your transformation threatens the illusion they've built their identity around. Carl Jung called this projection when someone unconsciously places their own unhealed wounds, fears, and insecurities onto someone else. When you were smaller, more silent, more agreeable, they could avoid their own reflection. But now, your light exposes their shadows. Your clarity unsettles their confusion. Your healing reveals their pain. And instead of facing it, they blame you. You are not hated because you've grown. You're hated because they haven't. Your evolution reminds them that they're stuck. Your strength challenges their fragility. Your boundaries feel like rejection, even when they're rooted in self-respect. People don't want to see their own limitations, so they attack the person who shows them what's possible. It's easier to label your confidence as arrogance than to admit they're insecure. It's easier to call your honesty rude than to sit with the discomfort of their own dishonesty. This is the silent war of awakening, the one you didn't expect, the one you never prepared for. You thought your growth would be met with support, with applause. But instead, it's met with suspicion, jealousy, and silence. That's because you've broken the contract, an invisible agreement that says, "Stay the same so I can feel safe." And the moment you rewrite that agreement, you disrupt the illusion. But make no mistake, this resistance is not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's confirmation that you've outgrown a version of reality that no longer serves your soul. You're not responsible for the emotions people project onto your healing. You're only responsible for staying aligned with your truth. Not everyone has the courage to face themselves. Some would rather destroy the mirror than see what it reflects. And in this journey, you are the mirror. Let them misunderstand you. Let them gossip. Let them distance themselves. Because the deeper you go into your spiritual awakening, the more you'll attract those who are on the same path. Those who see your truth and don't fear it. You weren't meant to stay hidden just to keep others comfortable. You were meant to rise, to inspire, to lead by example. And sometimes that means walking alone for a while, not because you're unloved, but because your light is preparing the way for those who will truly see you. If you've ever felt punished for growing, comment below. I choose my healing over their projection. Let's walk this path of truth and transformation together. 3. The shadow self explains their reactions. Every person carries a shadow. Carl Jung described it as the hidden part of ourselves that contains everything we reject, suppress, or deny. It's not just our anger or jealousy. It's also our confidence, our power, and even our inner peace if we were taught to be small or invisible. These parts don't vanish. They get buried deep, waiting for the right person or moment to bring them to the surface. And often, that moment is when someone around us starts to heal. When you begin to embody wholeness, confidence, peace, healthy boundaries, you unknowingly trigger what others have buried. Your light makes their shadow visible. Your calm reveals their chaos. Your self-respect confronts their self-abandonment. And this can make people uncomfortable, not because you've done something wrong, but because who you've become forces them to face what they've ignored in themselves. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But most people don't look inward. They project outward. And so begins the silent war. This war doesn't look like open conflict. It shows up as passive aggression, unexpected distance, sudden coldness, or even outright dislike. Friends who once praised you begin to question your choices. People who once relied on you now accuse you of changing. But the truth is, you didn't change to hurt them. You changed to heal yourself. And your healing became a mirror. They saw in you the version of themselves they never gave permission to emerge. That can feel threatening to someone who's still clinging to old identities. Take the story of Maya, for example. After years of burnout from always putting others first, she finally chose herself. She started waking up early, meditating, setting boundaries, and prioritizing her peace. At first, her life blossomed, but soon her coworkers began gossiping. Her sister told her she was too distant. Her boyfriend said she was acting too spiritual. What was really happening? Maya had stepped into alignment, and that alignment disrupted the emotional contracts people had with her. They didn't miss the old Maya. They missed the version of her who tolerated their chaos. This is the hidden price of transformation. As you grow, you'll stop fitting into the roles others assigned you. And some will resent you, not because you betrayed them, but because you stopped betraying yourself. They will say, "You've changed." They're right. But what they won't admit is that they expected you to stay broken, just so they could stay comfortable. Carl Jung taught that growth begins when we confront the shadow. And your very existence, once you've done that inner work, becomes a living invitation for others to do the same or reject it. It's not your job to carry their discomfort. It's not your task to make others feel safe with your transformation. Your only responsibility is to honor the truth you fought to remember. When someone's affection requires your silence, it's not love, it's possession. When your boundaries offend, it means they were never respected to begin with. Stay grounded. Stay clear. The ones who are meant for you will not be shaken by your wholeness. They'll be strengthened by it. And the ones who walk away are only showing you they were never ready to walk beside you in the first place. If this helped you understand the shadow self more deeply, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep uncovering the hidden parts of ourselves together. 4. Individuation threatens the illusion. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are beyond roles, expectations, and old identities. But the moment you begin to grow into that version of yourself, you quietly start threatening the illusion others have relied on. People become attached to who you were when it served their comfort. When you were agreeable, submissive, easy to control, or constantly available, they felt secure. Now that you've begun honoring your own path, something shifts in them, subtle at first, but undeniable. They may grow cold, distant, or critical. They may no longer laugh at your jokes or support your decisions. And it's not because you've changed for the worse, but because your authenticity disrupts their fantasy. They don't actually hate you. What they hate is what you represent. You are living proof that transformation is possible. You're the evidence that freedom, healing, and spiritual awakening are real, and that threatens the parts of them still living in denial. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your light casts shadows on everything they've tried to avoid confronting within themselves. In this sense, their resentment becomes a silent war, a war they wage not because of who you are, but because of who they are not ready to become. This is why spiritual wisdom matters so deeply during these transitions. Without it, you might internalize their disapproval and question your own progress. But with it, you begin to understand the deeper truth. When people project their discomfort onto you, it's rarely personal. It's emotional displacement. You've stopped playing the role they wrote for you, and now they must face the emptiness they once filled with your compliance. That's not cruelty. That's courage. That's reclaiming your energy and saying, "This is who I am, even if it costs me your approval." In everyday life, this can look like a woman choosing peace over people-pleasing and suddenly being called cold. It can look like a man breaking generational trauma cycles and being seen as arrogant by family. It can look like saying no to emotional labor and being painted as selfish. But all of it is the cost of awakening. As Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And when your evolution forces them to feel what they've long suppressed, they may turn against you, not because you're wrong, but because you're free. The silent war begins when your boundaries disrupt their control, when your confidence exposes their insecurity, when your truth dismantles the lie they built around your existence. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be whole. And the moment you embrace that, some relationships will dissolve, but only the ones built on illusion. You'll find that what remains is real, soul-nourishing, and aligned with your highest path. So let them misunderstand you. Let them distance themselves. Let them speak behind your back. That is not your burden to carry. Your only responsibility is to stay rooted in truth, to keep rising, and to protect the flame of your spiritual awakening from those who fear its fire. Do you feel the call to be your true self, even when it makes others uncomfortable? If so, affirm it with courage in the comments. I choose authenticity, no matter who it unsettles. 5. You threaten the collective unconscious. Carl Jung believed that beneath all human behavior lies a shared psychic blueprint, the collective unconscious, invisible network that connects us all and preserves patterns of thought, tradition, and behavior. This unconscious field favors sameness because sameness feels safe. So when someone breaks away, not just mentally, but energetically, it feels like a disturbance in the system. This is why, when you begin your healing, when you grow, when you awaken spiritually and reject the roles that once defined you, others don't always celebrate your evolution. Instead, something colder happens. They resist you. You're not just confronting your own past, you're challenging the emotional contracts others have made without knowing. When you break cycles of family trauma, when you decide not to follow society's assigned script, when you stop apologizing for being yourself, the system doesn't applaud you. It defends itself, not consciously, but automatically. People may begin to avoid you, belittle you, or question your motives, not because you've done something wrong, but because your growth threatens their comfort. You're no longer mirroring their unconscious patterns. You're breaking the mirror. It can feel deeply personal, but it's not. These reactions are part of a larger emotional reflex. You've become the trigger that reveals what others don't want to see within themselves. Like a living symbol of freedom, you disrupt the status quo they unconsciously depend on to feel stable. This is the moment when the spiritual awakening becomes less about peace and more about endurance. It's not just about connecting with the light, it's about surviving the shadow it exposes in others. People don't hate you because you've changed. They react because your change exposes their stagnation. And instead of facing that inner discomfort, they project it outward onto you. That's why they pull away. That's why they gossip. That's why they try to silence you with subtle disdain or passive disapproval. Because your new path disrupts their illusion of control. It's the silent war no one prepares you for. You're not being attacked by individuals. You're being rejected by a system trying to protect itself. Every time you choose authenticity over compliance, vulnerability over silence, healing over repression, you shake the foundations of that unconscious structure. And the closer you get to your truth, the more those still trapped in illusion feel uneasy. You're not a threat. You're a mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable when they haven't looked at themselves in a long time. But even in the isolation, there is power. Because every spiritual awakening requires this crossing from the familiar to the unknown, from the approval of others to the alignment with your soul. As Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege often costs the comfort of fitting in. Comment below. I break the cycle. I awaken the truth. If you're ready to rise above the collective patterns and live in alignment with your authentic self. 6. Outgrowing your persona feels like death to others. Outgrowing your persona doesn't just disrupt your inner world, it unsettles everyone who benefited from your disguise. According to Carl Jung, the persona is not who we truly are, but a mask worn to meet society's expectations. And when you finally decide to remove that mask, to no longer bend, shrink, or silence yourself just to fit in, people feel betrayed, not because you've wronged them, but because you've interrupted their illusion of who you were supposed to be. They don't mourn your growth. They mourn their control over you. This is the silent grief people carry when you stop playing small for their comfort. You might have been the one who never said no, who kept the peace, who always smiled through the discomfort. But the moment you start honoring your needs, drawing lines, and standing firm, it feels like rebellion to those who mistook your compliance for identity. They say you've changed, but what they mean is you've stopped being easy to manage. And that realization threatens the roles and dynamics they depended on. The shift from your masked self to your real self is not just your liberation, it's their loss of power. And often, they respond not with understanding, but with resistance. Cold shoulders, dismissive remarks, unspoken resentment. A woman who always absorbed everyone's burdens without complaint suddenly decides to focus on her own healing. A man who never challenged the status quo begins to speak uncomfortable truths. A friend who once abandoned their own needs to be available for everyone steps back to reclaim time for solitude. These acts of self-honoring are often met not with celebration, but with quiet punishment, because your transformation reflects back to others their own avoidance. their own stagnation, their own masks. Carl Jung understood that individuation, the path to becoming whole, requires confrontation, not just with yourself, but with those who preferred the performance. When you walk this path, you begin to see who truly loves you and who merely loved the version of you that served their needs. Some people don't hate your growth. They hate what your growth reminds them of, the freedom they have not yet chosen. They haven't grieved their own lost self. So when you resurrect yours, they feel abandoned, left behind. But the death of your persona is not the death of your relationships. It's the death of pretense. And what remains afterward, though fewer in number, is rooted in truth. The pain of letting go is real, but so is the power that rises in its place. You begin to see clearly. You begin to breathe deeper. You begin to walk in rooms without shrinking, to speak without seeking permission, to live without performing. And though others may resist this version of you, your soul recognizes it as home. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this privilege isn't always met with applause. It's often met with silence, projection, or even hostility. But the path of truth was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to be real. And when you stop living for acceptance and start living in alignment, you become untouchable, not because you are cold, but because you are whole. If you're ready to live beyond the mask and embrace your true self, don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on reclaiming your power and identity. 7. Wholeness reveals their fragmentation. When you begin to embody both strength and softness, when you no longer feel the need to choose between being powerful or tender, you disrupt a pattern that most people around you are still unconsciously trapped in. You become living proof that the masculine and feminine can coexist within one soul in harmony. Carl Jung taught that the path to individuation, the true spiritual awakening, is achieved through integration of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects within each of us. And when you do that, when you stop hiding or overcompensating and simply become whole, something begins to shift. But it's not always welcomed. In fact, it can silently provoke those around you. Not because of what you're doing to them, but because of what you reflect back to them. They see your wholeness, and it feels like a mirror exposing their inner divide. They see the traits you have learned to embrace, the vulnerability, the intuition, the emotional honesty, and it reminds them of the parts they had to bury long ago to survive. If they were raised to suppress their emotions, your sensitivity seems weak to them. If they were taught to dominate rather than nurture, your balance between assertiveness and compassion seems confusing, even threatening. So they react, often unconsciously. They criticize, withdraw, or turn cold. It feels personal. It hurts. But it's not about you. It's about the war inside them. People tend to attack what they were taught to reject within themselves. If someone has silenced their tenderness to fit in, seeing you be freely soft makes them uncomfortable. If they've had to kill their own dreams just to be accepted, your authenticity will seem arrogant to them. So they hate it. Not because you've wronged them, but because you've awakened something within them that they were trying hard to forget. The hate is a shield, a defense mechanism against their own awakening. And yet, this is spiritual wisdom in action. Your presence, your integration, is medicine. But medicine doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it burns before it heals. Sometimes your growth feels like rejection to others, because it highlights the places they've refused to grow. They don't hate you. They hate the discomfort that comes when truth brushes against their denial. The more whole you become, the more likely you are to outgrow the roles people cast you in. You no longer play the victim, the pleaser, the one who stays small to make others comfortable. And as you drop those masks, people who benefited from your fragmentation may no longer recognize you. That's the real reason behind the silent war. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've stopped performing. You've stopped breaking yourself into pieces just to be digestible. They won't always say it out loud, but they feel it. You've become a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see what you reflect. But your task is not to shrink back or apologize for your healing. Your task is to keep integrating, keep walking the path of inner truth. Because the more you live from that place of spiritual alignment, the more you call others toward their own wholeness, even if their first reaction is resistance. Wholeness doesn't always attract applause. Sometimes it attracts fear, projection, even hate. But in truth, it's the clearest sign that you've stepped into your power and you're no longer afraid to be fully seen. Did this resonate with you? If so, comment wholeness below. Let's keep exploring the power of balance and self-integration together. 8. The transcendent function makes you dangerous. True spiritual awakening begins when you learn to sit in the tension between two opposing truths. You no longer choose either extreme, not just love without boundaries, or boundaries without love, but both held together in conscious balance. You begin to embody empathy without self-abandonment and detachment without indifference. This ability to hold contradictions without collapsing into reaction is what Carl Jung called the transcendent function, a rare psychological maturity that dissolves inner conflict by integrating both sides of the psyche. The moment you start practicing this inner integration, you become unpredictable. People can no longer anticipate your reactions because you're no longer reacting from old emotional wounds or habitual roles. You're responding from presence, from clarity, from your inner authority, and that unsettles those who benefited from your predictability. They don't consciously realize it, but your spiritual evolution threatens their emotional structure. They feel unsafe, not because you've done harm, but because they can no longer manipulate your guilt, your compliance, or your silence. Your calm makes them nervous. Your detachment feels like rejection. Your boundaries, once absent, now feel like punishment to those who were used to taking from you without limit. When you break unconscious patterns, it reflects the inertia in others. They may begin to pull away. They may criticize, gossip, or even attack your character, not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've awakened to your worth. And worth, when truly embodied, offends those who survive by staying small. Spiritual awakening is not gentle. It dismantles illusions. It asks you to let go of the version of yourself that made everyone else feel safe at your expense. The transcendent function doesn't just shift how you feel, it shifts how others experience you. And sometimes, that shift is enough to trigger the silent war. It's not loud, it's not obvious, but it's real. You begin to notice that people act colder. Invitations stop coming. The energy around you changes. And deep down, you know it's because something in you stopped being available for their comfort. What makes you dangerous is that you're no longer emotionally available for manipulation. You don't explain yourself endlessly. You don't prove your goodness through overgiving. You don't shrink just to maintain peace. You found another way, the middle path between extremes. And those who have not done that inner work will struggle to understand you. They'll call you distant, aloof, selfish. But what they really mean is, you're no longer who I need you to be, so I can avoid myself. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But once you activate the transcendent function, you break this cycle. You reclaim your inner space. And while others may perceive it as arrogance, it is simply alignment. You're no longer acting from pain. You're living from awareness. And that will always be misunderstood by those still living in reaction. Let them misunderstand you. The cost of awakening is often exile from the familiar, but what you gain in return is clarity, power, and peace. Not everyone will celebrate your healing, but your soul will. And that's the only approval that ever truly mattered. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss insights like this. Comment below. I embrace my transcendent power. If you're ready to break free from old patterns and step into your higher self. 9. Becoming authentic comes at a price. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what no one tells you is that this privilege often comes with the painful cost of losing people who only loved your mask. When you begin to honor your truth, you're not just shifting your path, you're unsettling everyone who found comfort in your old version. It's not your growth they hate, it's the way your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. People don't always despise transformation. They despise the mirror it holds up to their own stillness. When you stop performing and start living authentically, you're no longer predictable. You stop saying yes to please others. You set boundaries. You speak truthfully. And as strange as it sounds, that truth can make people deeply uncomfortable. Carl Jung called this journey individuation, and it is a sacred but lonely path. As you peel away the false self, what's left is raw, honest, and deeply human. And not everyone can sit with that version of you, because it asks them to sit with themselves. There was a woman who spent years being the emotional caretaker in her circle. She said yes when she meant no. She smiled through the pain. She made herself small so others could feel big. But one day, after a deep spiritual awakening, she stopped pretending. She began to say what she meant. She stopped apologizing for her needs. And suddenly, friends she'd supported for years began to pull away. One of them even said, "You've changed." But what she really meant was, "I don't know how to relate to you now that you're no longer easy to control." The truth is, you can't become who you really are and still expect everyone to come along for the ride. Some people loved you because you dimmed your light to match theirs. But when you turn that light back on, they cover their eyes, not because it hurts them, but because it reveals their own darkness. This is not betrayal. This is growth. Jung understood that the psyche resists change, but the soul demands it. When your soul begins to rise, everything that was built on fear, shame, or performance begins to fall. You might be accused of being distant, arrogant, or selfish. But those are just labels people use to describe boundaries they don't benefit from. They're reacting not to your truth, but to their own discomfort. It's important to remember that not all losses are tragedies. Some are sacred edits. Some are grace in disguise. You're not falling apart. As Carl Jung showed us, the work of becoming whole is not about pleasing others. It's about becoming aligned with your essence. When people start to withdraw from your life as you evolve, don't see it as punishment. See it as the universe refining your circle to match your vibration. You're not meant to be understood by everyone. You're meant to be real. If this message resonates with your soul, leave a comment of truth. I choose to be authentic, even if it costs me everything. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay connected to more spiritual wisdom that empowers your journey. 10. The hate you face is proof you're on the right path. The hate you face is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It's often the clearest sign that you've done something right. When you begin to walk the path of individuation, of truly becoming who you are meant to be, you become a threat, not through violence or aggression, but through presence. Your very existence becomes a mirror that reflects back to others the parts of themselves they've avoided, denied, or buried. This is not just psychology, it's spiritual wisdom. You're not just healing your mind, you're awakening your soul. And that kind of awakening doesn't just shift your life, it shifts the energy around you. Carl Jung taught that our real task is not to seek love from others, but to uncover and remove the internal barriers we've built against it. And when you begin doing that, when you begin facing your wounds, owning your truth, standing in your light, you break an unspoken contract. The contract says, stay small so others feel safe. Stay quiet so others aren't threatened. Stay broken so no one has to change. But once you outgrow that, you force people to feel things they've avoided feeling for years. Your growth becomes their discomfort. Your joy exposes their numbness. Your freedom shines light on their cages. And often, instead of doing the inner work, they project their unease onto you. That projection looks like resistance, like coldness, like mockery, or sometimes hate. You might find people you've known for years begin to withdraw. Their support becomes silence. Their warmth turns into criticism. You wonder what you did wrong. But here's the truth. You didn't betray them. You just stopped betraying yourself. And when that happens, people will either rise with you or fall away from you. The hate you receive is not always personal. It's energetic. It's symbolic. It's what happens when your light shines too brightly in places where shadows have been comfortable for too long. Take, for example, the woman who chooses to leave a job that was draining her spirit. She starts her own business, follows her passion, radiates self-belief. But as she rises, people begin whispering, mocking, calling her too much. What's really happening? Her courage makes them uncomfortable. Her transformation stirs something in them they haven't dealt with. Her success reminds them of the dreams they gave up on. So rather than looking inward, they lash outward. And this is how spiritual awakening becomes spiritual warfare, not through weapons or noise, but through silence, distance, judgment, and projection. You become a living contradiction to the illusions people cling to. You become the reminder they didn't ask for. And that's where the silent war begins, not because you wanted it, but because your very healing unsettles what they've chosen to remain asleep to. The more you embody your authenticity, the more those who haven't yet found theirs will feel challenged just by being near you. And in that moment, you must decide, will you dim your light to keep others comfortable, or will you continue becoming? This is the cost of transformation. This is the quiet tax of awakening. But this is also how you know you're evolving. The resistance, the hate, the cold shoulders, they're not rejection. They're proof. Proof that you're shedding what no longer serves you. Proof that your soul is stepping forward, even when your past tries to hold on. The war is not really with others. It's with your old self begging you to turn back. But you won't. Because once you've tasted the truth, there's no going back to pretending. Sometimes, the shift in how people treat you has nothing to do with who you are, and everything to do with the silent war your light triggers in their unresolved pain. As Carl Jung taught, unconscious projections shape how people react to what they don't understand or can't control. Remember, your growth will often challenge others. Don't dim your light to make them comfortable. If this message resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs this wisdom, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful insight from our future videos. Your journey matters, and we're walking it with you.